college football is now upon us. And it's that week for the University of Alabama and Texas. It's Alabama-Texas week, that's right. And I don't usually do a lot of prediction videos, but this one was requested by a few of our listeners. Michael McCullough, and I think the old timer as well, had asked for me to give my input on this game, which was an easy request to fulfill because I am an Alabama fan. Now, let's talk about it. The home of the Common Joe and the Common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking. How's it going out there today, boys and girls in Sporting Land? It's another episode of the OCF. That's right. The Outlaw of College Football. That's me, JPC. It can also be found on Twitter at OCF Productions and on Facebook under Jesse Paul Clark, spelled Jesse without the I. That's right. Now, we're going to do a little prediction video today. Alabama versus Texas is coming up this week. Alabama and Texas, not many people know this, but Texas actually pretty much owns Alabama overall in this series, albeit a little misleading because most of these wins took place back in the 19 teens. Alabama is 1-7-1 against Texas. Until they beat them in that 2009 national championship game, Alabama had never beat Texas in 130 years of football. So now it's time to rectify this thing a little bit, hopefully, for the University of Alabama. They haven't played each other in a home-and-home, like I said, since the 19 teens. I haven't got it right in front of me, but I think the last time that Alabama was in Austin, Texas, it was probably around 1915 or 1918 or something like that, pre-World War I. Same thing for Texas and Tuscaloosa coming next year. So this is something that's been on the shelf for a very long time because a lot of people don't realize this, but once upon a time, Alabama and Texas were in the same conference, and now, ironically, they're about to be in the same conference again. They used to be in what was called the Southern Conference or something like that back in the day. So that's why they played each other. Well, now, fast forward to now, we jump in the DeLorean with Marty and Doc, and here we are. It's 2022, and what do you know? They're playing again. This time, Alabama seems like they might be more of a prominent power somewhat than Texas. But last week's games, amazingly, both teams scored over 50 points, but there wasn't a lot of stats and a lot of just glamorous stats out there for those stat geeks that love stats. And I was like, how can that be? That both these teams scored over 50-plus points. And then it sort of dawned on me. All four teams in these two games had error-free football, basically. Now, in the Texas game, there was a few interceptions on both sides. Texas had one. UL Monroe had one. In the Alabama game, though, Utah had no turnovers. Alabama had no turnovers. Alabama had no sacks. There was no sacks in that game. So it was error-free ball for the most part. And I got a few stats here. Bryce Young rushed for actually 100 yards. Now, he passed for 195 yards, which is somewhat pedestrian considering the Heisman numbers he put up last year. But it was amazing to me that he rushed for 100 yards because usually he's a little apprehensive about taking off and running with the ball, even though he has the wheels to do it. I think he wants to sit back there and he's trying to prove a point to the NFL people in the future that, hey, I can run, but I'm more of a passer and I can stay in the pocket and do what I need to do to win the game for my team with my arm. But I think that yesterday he showed that, hey, he's starting to understand that, hey, I can actually use my wheels just a little bit more than what I'm doing. He's going a little too far to the right to try to prove something. And he somewhat hurts the team sometimes. That's the only problem I've ever had with Bryce is that he doesn't know when to take off and run. Where usually it's the opposite. Usually you got a running quarterback and it reverts to the running over the passing when he gets flustered. Bryce has not never done that. He's tried to stick it out in the pocket, and sometimes that's his only fault. You got to have a happy medium there, and I think Bryce is finally finding that out. And that could be scary for a lot of people as they have to prepare for Bryce Young's passing and his legs. Also rushing, Jamar Gibbs had 93 yards. He had a slow start at the beginning, but at the end, in the second half, he started coming on and looking like the Jahmyr Gibbs that everybody thought he would look like. Also, you had the emergence of a couple of receivers. There's a lot of questions around the receiving core. You had Jermaine Burton come in from Georgia as a transfer. Everybody thought he was going to be the star. Now, he did get his fair share of catches in this game. All three receivers that were leading receivers had 5 catches apiece. Burton did have his 5 catches for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. Trayshawn Holden was a nice little surprise. He had 5 catches as well, 70 yards, 14-yard average per catch, and 2 touchdowns. And the real big star was Kobe Prentice to me. Although he didn't get in the end zone, the fact that he's a true freshman, he's able to come out there and hold his own and get as many receiving catches as the rest of the guys that's got more experience on him was a nice little surprise for the Alabama fans, as he had 60 yards receiving, as 12-yard average per catch. But like I said, he didn't get in the end zone, but that'll happen eventually. Now, on the Texas side of things, Quinn Ewers did throw an interception early on, but the thing is, he righted himself, and he did what he had to do. And let me get back to that. Alabama and Texas both blew out these teams, and everybody, well, you're supposed to blow them out, blah, blah, blah. And that's the double-edged sword in playing these games, is if you blow them out, people, well, that's what you're supposed to do. If you don't blow them out, they laugh at you. Well, see, that's what happened to UCLA, Nebraska, and Iowa yesterday. They didn't do what they were supposed to do in those games. Virginia Tech's another one. They didn't do what they were supposed to do against Old Dominion in-state school that now they're tied 2-2 with. So what you've got to do is do what you're supposed to do in these games. And if people don't like that, well, then they're just looking for something. They're just looking for something to be negative about. But they did what they were supposed to do in these 2 games. And I was impressed by Texas righting the ship. They was a little shaky in the first half, but they came on in the second half and did what they were supposed to do. And they beat this UL Monroe team 52-10. So you do what you got to do, or you'll end up like Virginia Tech. Getting back to Texas's stats here, you had Quinn Ewers for 225 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, and 1 INT. Bijan Robinson had 10 rushes for 71 yards, a touchdown. Jatavian Sanders, the tight end, had a breakout game for him. 6 receptions, 85 yards, 14.2-yard average, one touchdown. And the thing is, Jatavian made an interesting comment this week. They asked him about the game through Sports Illustrated, and he told Sports Illustrated that if they didn't have good practices all week, that Alabama could indeed blow them out. Now, that's a stark contrast to what some of Alabama's former players like Keelan Robinson have been saying. He said basically that Alabama, we know them boys. We can hang with those boys. We can beat those boys, that kind of deal. Whereas Sanders here is sort of taking a different approach. He's sort of lubing Alabama up a little bit, kissing up to them, I think, playing possum, so to speak. But neither one's going to work in the end, in my opinion. But in the past, Alabama has had trouble with budding superstar quarterbacks who are trying to make a name for themselves, or quarterbacks that just have the game of their life, along with a great tight end. We've had problems with great tight ends in the past, way back when Florida had numerous great tight ends. Clemson had a great tight end. Numerous teams, Texas A&M had a great tight end, and the upstart quarterback. Johnny Manziel made his name on Alabama. Stephen Garcia, South Carolina, had the game of his life, made his one shining moment at Alabama. Zach Calzada last year for Texas A&M. So it's an eerily similar situation to some of the games that have taken place in the past. But the only thing about this is Alabama in these early season games against big-time schools are like 9 or 10-0 early on with Nick Saban. So Texas is going to have to be the first team to do that. Now, can they do it? There's a lot of firsts that took place on Nick Saban last year. A couple of his pupils did beat him for the first time, so there's that hope for Texas. The game's also being played in Austin. Back to Alabama. The only thing that concerned me about Alabama in that game, yes, they shut them out, but they had 0 sacks and 0 turnovers. And you're like, how does that happen? How do you shut a team completely down like that? Well, I don't think Utah State really had the offense to make first down. So they weren't on the field long enough to turn the ball over or get sacked. So that's probably the reason why you don't see an astronomical amount of sacks or interceptions or fumble recoveries, because Utah State just had a lot of 3 and outs from what I've seen. So in the end, if you're going to give me a prediction on this game, I'd like to have everybody's prediction on this game. If you don't mind, drop it in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this game, who's going to win, and why. And whoever gets the closest, I might try to come up with some kind of little prize package for the game. In the end, I think Texas, much to the chagrin of a lot of people out there, my Sooner contingent that loves to watch my channel, I think Texas is going to stay close for a little while. I think they're going to make it a close game for a little while, and I hope they don't. Believe me, I like blowouts a lot more than I like close games. A lot of people's like, man, I'd like to see a close game. Not me, man. I mean, who wants to see your team almost get beat, right? I think that it'll be a game that stays within 2 scores, probably throughout the game up until the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter, if I had to really make a prediction. And I'm going to say that in the end, Alabama will make a little separation there about the 10-minute mark, maybe kick a field goal that puts them up by 3 scores, or touchdown and puts them up by 3 scores. And I'm going to say Alabama's going to win this game 37-20. Now, you guys and gals tell me what you think. Drop in the comments section. If you don't mind, there's a little heart option underneath here, down there by the download option, I think, in this video. If you don't mind, click on that. Throw a few dollars in the coffers, $2, $3, $5, whatever you can afford. Keep us off the YouTube teat. And as always, KMCA to all the other teams. Class is now officially dismissed.